The human soul has a minimum daily requirement of entertainment, but listening to a podcast like you're doing right now, yeah, that doesn't count. Welcome to the world of MGM Rewards, where we have the greatest live shows on earth, the biggest names in sports, the best chefs on the planet, and the most unforgettable nights of your life. This is way beyond watching 20-second clips on your phone. This is all the entertainment you can handle and more. So join MGM Rewards now and visit MGMResorts.com to book your next Vegas getaway. Welcome to the show.
Life insurance. What's your excuse for putting it off? Can't afford it? Too much hassle? Think your work coverage is enough? There's a lot of excuses for putting off life insurance, but one big reason why you shouldn't. If the unexpected were to happen to you, who would pay the mortgage, the kids' tuition, and all the other bills? In a time of grief, the last thing you would want is for your family to have to sell the house and struggle to survive financially. At Ethos, we could get you covered in just 10 minutes and boom, family protected. Rates can increase the longer you wait, so no more excuses. Take 10 minutes today and discover the modern way to get the life insurance coverage you need. Ethos, fast and easy online term life insurance. Up to $2 million in coverage with no medical exam. Some policies as low as $1 a day. Answer a few health questions and get your free quote at ethoslife.com/audio. That's ethoslife.com/audio.
Steering wheel. Lots of steering wheel here. Steering wheel. Hey, steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to him. Come on. Whoa.
You like my bass? You like it?
How the f*** is this possible?
I'm driving like a grandma. Get that, Ralph? Did you hear me? I'm on radio. The rest of the race. Ralph, acknowledge. So come on, close it down and kill him. We've got a lunatic on the track down the Hanger State.
I am so annoyed.
Welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 749, the Italian Grand Prix review.
No, Todd, not now.
That's right. This is Todd, aka Negative Camber. And tonight, for your kind consideration, we are reviewing the Italian Grand Prix. I'm representing, for those of you on YouTube, I'm wearing my Italian shirt. But before reviewing the race, I have to introduce my guest tonight. You know him, you love him.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charsley, the International.
It's Paul. Wait, I got to point this way. It's Paul Charsley. Paul, how you doing?
I'm all right.
Yeah, it's been a hectic weekend.
It's been a hectic weekend. Just flew in back from Laguna Seca. And
you guys got a little roughed up out there this weekend.
We did get a little roughed up. Yeah, people were using. Well, I didn't think we painted targets on our car, but it seems like we did. So yeah, we got hit by the sanctioning body and by the competitors this weekend. So it was, not everyone's going to be we are on the podium again, but it was a tough weekend, quite honestly.
Tough weekend, yeah.
Managed to scrape something out of it, so we're still in the hunt for the championship.
That's right. You're in P2?
P3 now.
P3, okay. So you're trying to get a whiff.
Yeah, it's close. We're leading the sprint championship still.
Yeah.
But there's a sprint just for the shorter races, and then the overall, which includes Daytona and Sebring and Petit Le Mans as well. So we're still right there.
You have, is it next week at Laguna?
Yeah, we were at Laguna. We're going to Long Beach.
Oh, Long Beach.
A week and a half. Yeah,
week and a half. Yeah.
So I'm excited about Long Beach. Long Beach is a great event. It's gonna be interesting to see what it's like with the COVID rules and over there, because they're pretty strict down there for that. So but the track and the events always been really, really great fun to be at. So we're just gonna shrug it off and move on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, there was an Italian Grand Prix this weekend at Monza. Everybody's talking about it. We might as well just jump right into it and talk about the crash. So whose fault was it, Paul? Mazepin or Schumacher?
It was obviously Mazepin.
Yeah, clearly. He apologized.
Yeah. Did he? Yeah, that's good.
All right. Now that we got the big crash out of the way,
right,
we can talk about the actual Grand Prix.
Yes.
Good grief. Let's get that off our shoulders. I don't want to belabor the whole damn podcast over this crash. Okay.
Yeah, it's just the importance of Mazepin's career is on everyone's mind.
It is. Everybody's worried about that, as they should be. So, Paul, it was always going to be hard to replicate the excitement, the energy, the grandeur, and the glory that was Zandvoort, right?
Right.
What a great race that was. But I have
orange dye, I think.
Yeah. Exactly, and orange smoke bomb. So but I have to hand it to our Italian friends, man. They did a great job this weekend. It was only like half capacity, and to all of you Italians out there, great job, great fans as always. The Tifosi are awesome. Monza put on a great show this weekend, despite the doldrums that was the sprint race. The actual race itself was a glorious event and had tremendous amount of action. Certainly, Paul, they talk about this track and they talk, well, it's not a big passing track, but boy, we saw a lot of that. Yes, there was a lot of DRS infused efforts, but there was some great passing that wasn't. This is a tough old track. It's a legacy, iconic track for a reason, Paul. There's only 11 turns on there, but boy, you got to get them right. Yes, you do. As we've spoken about before, just like the Red Bull Ring, the smaller the turns, it measures the importance so much. And even though there's, 11 turns? Yeah. Half of them are all one turn anyway with the chicanes, et cetera, right? So it's, there's really, you got to talk about braking areas rather than even corners. So there's, maybe 4 braking areas. So yeah, you got to get it right. You got to get the car stability in there. You got to get that balance between no aero, right? And having enough grip to actually get the car slowed down and get it through some of those corners. And because it is interesting, they do run very low downforce, but there are some significant corners that would benefit from good downforce. So getting that balance right is exceptional. And then the drivers have to be very precise and consistent every time, because you give up that little bit, and that little bit is going to hurt you with those long straights for a very long time and allow other competitors to get by you. So, yeah. And in some way, those little errors, I mean, if you don't get the braking zone right, Paul, and you scrub 0.8 or a second off during, in that chicane, that's just compounded down that straight, Exactly. Yeah. And it adds up lap after lap. Yeah. 101 in racing school is you find the longest straightaway and you move to the corner before that. And there's your most important corner, right? Yeah. Because everything you do there is compounded for a very long time of the lap. So if you come out 2 miles an hour faster, you're 2 miles an hour faster for, instead a good percentage of the lap. So yeah, it's very, very important to minimize mistakes, but maximize corner speed, which is always the game, really. Yeah, that's pretty much the whole key to your world, isn't it? It is. Yeah. So it's a tough old track, and it produced a great race. Certainly, we entered this race with Mercedes, were really the quicker car at Monza, and Red Bull were given a few gifts over the weekend. To be on pole and be as competitive as they were with very little wing on that Red Bull, they were really kind of in the catbird seat heading into this weekend, knowing that the Mercedes is probably the fastest car at the track. Right. And it was, so it was really setting up for a great race. It was the second sprint race of the season that they're testing out. Just want to get your thoughts on that sprint race and kind of what you thought about now that we've had a couple of them. Yeah, a couple of them. Not much has changed, except, it's very similar to the other one where you're just trying to minimize anything negative. You've done your qualifying, you go into this qualifying race, and I think everyone's in protection mode. No one's out there just hanging it all out, because as we've seen losers in the qualifying races. We haven't seen a lot of winners, right? So, with Perez and then what happened to Gasly, et cetera, it's a lot to give up after all that work you've done in practice and in qualifying, et cetera. So I think basically when they get into that race, they're just kind of trying to stay where they are. And then as we saw in the big race, once the gloves are off and the real prizes are out there to be achieved, that they can, the track somehow transformed itself into a proper race, right? So I think it's the mindset of everyone just to protect yourself. And that's kind of the kind of races we're getting, which is probably not going to be a thrill a minute. Yeah, well, there's so much on the line. It's like go out and drive, but whatever you don't damage the car. You kind of get the sense that everyone's protecting position and driving at 75%. And you bring up the great point, Paul, when you juxtapose the sprint race first 18 laps of that and the first 18 laps of the actual race, which is where the money is, it is a markedly different race.
Yeah, I mean, if they separated the qualifying from the sprint race results, you might see something different, right? I mean, but of course, as you say, they're still starting to protect the car because they want a race car for Sunday. Yeah. But if if somehow the qualifying was separated and there was extra points for the sprint race and it was a singular event not affecting the rest of the weekend, you might see a bit more action. But as the process is right now, it's just not going to happen. I don't see it.
Yeah, so jury's out on that for me as we speak. Well, let's talk about the race. Let's jump into it before we get to the crash I was actually alluding to earlier. We have to start at the top of the podium with McLaren, with Lando Norris in P2, Daniel Ricciardo P1. Now, you could say that McLaren were hanging about this weekend to pick up the pieces if anyone stumbled, but that's not really the whole story. McLaren were there or thereabouts all weekend long and were in those positions they were in on merit, hassling the Red Bulls and the Mercedes cars all weekend long, including in qualifying, the sprint race, and then on Sunday. So they were there legit. That car, for whatever reason, that track, that configuration, that aero load with that Mercedes power, McLaren were there, and they were there to be real contenders all weekend long. Ricciardo had a great start, took the lead from Max, and then held off the Red Bull for the first stint. Dan boxed on lap 22, took on hard compounds, and was in control of the race, despite his teammate, sort of running tail gunner, calling him to pick up the pace because Lando was feeling some pressure.
What else are you going to do?
Well, right. And he's Lando is a little bit under pressure from Lewis. But a fantastic return to form for Daniel, because let's be honest, he's not fared well since moving to McLaren. And this is a result he desperately needed. Great return to form for Dan, driving like the Dan that we all know and love. And to be honest with you, he got out of the car and he said, I'm at a loss for words. And that's saying something for Dan Ricciardo.
He wasn't at a loss for smiles, though. So that was good. Right. Yeah. I mean, going into Monza, we thought, McLaren have showed their straight line speed before, and some of the tracks have been really showed what they had, but I think there was a potential always before even the weekend started with the new McLaren are going to be very, very strong. They showed it all the way through. With qualifying super, super important, and the other teams, maybe they tripped up a little bit. Obviously, Bottas had the start of the back, and he was, it might have been a different story if he hadn't had his penalty. But correct. That's what a season is, right? Yeah. There's winners and losers, and you give up some, and you gain some in different places. And this time it was McLaren's turn. What impresses me is that we were talking about the track and how important getting the braking under control is probably more important than anything, because that sets the stage for the whole corner. And that's something that Dan struggled with, which was his, strong point that all the other teams he's raced for is, Dan on the brakes is better than, anybody out there. And he's been struggling to be as good as Lando. So I think Monza proves that maybe he's got it figured out on how to get the best out of those brakes and adapt the car to his style. Obviously, it's really close between those two guys, which is great to see too. But yeah, it was an impressive, heady drive. He's won a lot of Grand Prix already, so he's not going to fall to pieces when being in the lead. But this was, just like he can now breathe, right? Yeah. I mean, just a fantastic drive and an effort by the whole McLaren team, quite honestly.
Yeah, well, Lando, as you mentioned, had a terrific race, held off Lewis at the start, and then keeping the 7-time champion behind for most of the first stint anyway. Lando is pressing Dan because Lewis is pressing Lando, but he played, in the end, he played the team game, didn't do anything stupid, had a mega restart, I might add, on the restart after the safety car. That was some seriously brave moves against Charles Leclerc. Great battle. Yeah. Great battle there. And what a return to form in aggregate for the team, who, just as a reminder, I mean, they were desperately looking for outside investors just a few months ago to keep sort of the lights going. And that was just a few short months ago.
There was a lot of people on sabbatical over there at McLaren. I'll tell you that. You pick up the phone, there wasn't many people answering for a while. So
yeah, they had that, they were impacted by COVID quite a bit with the shutdown and everything else. And so this win puts them squarely in the best of the rest category position for third in the Constructors' Championship. And this is, if you go back a few years when Red Bull were very unhappy with Renault and they were looking for a different engine supply, this is why Mercedes was reticent about selling engines to Red Bull, because Red Bull has the aero package down with Adrian Newey, right? And they knew putting that Merc engine in a Red Bull would be instant competition. Well, I got news. If McLaren does get this chassis sorted, they have instant competition, and they may rue the day they agreed to sell Zach Brown engines.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, McLaren, obviously they were in trouble. I'm not sure they're completely out of it, right? But, they're in a different place than Ferrari, who have been a manufacturer for decades.
Sure.
They're a small, even though they make very cool, very expensive cars, they're still a small sports car manufacturer,
right?
And they're trying to balance that with a Formula One team, whereas, as I said, Ferrari are a manufacturer and they're fully protected with their funds, and then Red Bull are being funded separately. They're not got anything to do with building road cars, so it put them in a bit of a pickle for sure. But what Zach did with bringing in Lando initially, and then just the whole vibe of the team, I think, is super, super positive, which is fun to see. Now, I think Lando was a little bit lucky in his positioning, because obviously he did lose a slot at the start, right. And due to Lewis and Max going at it, enabled Lando to get that position back, and then he made hay while the sun shone at that point, and definitely backed up Dan. He wasn't going to do anything silly. I mean, you can say what you want on the radio. I mean, I'm sure he's had more time at McLaren than Dan, and I'm sure he felt he deserved the guy to reap the rewards first. But that's the way it is. He is going to get his time, and his job was basically to protect Dan at that point, which he did very, very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, if you're British and you're ready for another hero, Lando is certainly a contender. The guy, incredible drive, fantastic, and what a testament to all of the hard work for all of the men and women over in Woking to pull this off and turn it around. And Zach coming in and facing really difficult times, but bringing in the right manager like Andreas Seidel, coming in and turning that team around and giving them room to breathe.
That guy has been pivotal. As I said, Zach, he's got his strengths individually, but one of the big ones is choosing the right people to be in the right place, right?
Yeah, for sure. Great result. I am elated to see McLaren up there 1-2. First 1-2 finish for McLaren since 2010. It's a big result.
More than a decade, it is.
Yeah,
it's
big
good
result.
to see.
So
well done.
Great to see. All right, let's talk about second place. You got Mercedes with Lewis Hamilton, a DNF, Valtteri Bottas, and P3. Let's jump into the fray, and we'll talk about this. Lewis had a better start than he did on Saturday, moved up behind Max, only to miss an aggressive move, which dropped him down on that first lap, dropped him behind Lando for running wide and cutting the chicane. And he got behind Lando, very similar to the sprint race, stuck behind Lando for most of the first stint, but a slow stop by Mercedes, about a 4 or 5 second stop, put him in the crosshairs of Max as he came together in turn one as Lewis exited the pits. So Lewis is coming out the pits, going slower than Max. Max had a lot more speed. They both get into turn one and collide in turn two. Both drivers refuse to give way. Lewis's left rear tire hit Max's right rear tire, either way, hit Lewis's left. This launched the Dutchman up and over the top of Lewis with the halo protecting his head for sure from a large rear wheel, leaving Lewis to say that he's very grateful for the halo and lucky to be alive. Certainly it was rolling over the top of the car, and certainly the close-up shot, you can see that rear tire rolling over the top of the halo, so kudos to Halo on that. The clash was ultimately pinned on Max. And Team Lewis Hamilton fans were satisfied that that was the right decision to try and calm down Max's aggressive driving style for sure. But the steward's decision seems to be a little bit off to me, given the incident and the result and penalty in Silverstone when you juxtapose the two. The steward said this, Paul, quote, "The stewards observed on CCTV footage that the driver of car 44 was driving an avoiding line, although his position caused car 33 to go onto the curb. But further, the stewards observed that car 33 was not at all alongside car 44 until significantly into the entry into turn 1. In the opinions of the stewards, this maneuver was attempted too late for the driver of car 33 to have a, quote, right to racing room, which I find mind-boggling at that point. I watched the review. He was significant. I even tweeted pictures. He was significantly alongside Lewis into turn 2. It almost seems to suggest that the element now has been moving ahead of the curve and really about the braking zone at this point, saying that he wasn't significantly alongside in the braking zone. Well, if that's the litmus test, wow. Yeah. We could go back and look at a lot of altercations and rejudge those from that standpoint. You have to understand that Max was going down the straight at full chat. Lewis is coming out of the pits, not at full chat yet. They both, came together.
And Max, Lewis is on cold tires too, so his braking performance is not going to be there. So
it's not going to be like Max's. Right. So Max brakes late into the braking zone, as you would expect a car at full chat with hot tires to go in deep. Turned in, Lewis is on cold tires, coming out of the pit. Lewis ran Max out to the edge of the track, which I got no issue with. That's what you do to try to make it difficult. Max turns in well alongside Lewis into turn 1. And then there's that moment. Lewis left that enough room on the entry into turn 1. Max took it. There's a gap there. And then all of a sudden, the gap starts to close. Max hits the sausage curbs, bounces his car up, hits the rear tire, launches him over the top. So I watched the video multiple times back, and I very much agree with Martin Brundle and Paul di Resta. I feel like it was certainly a racing incident. I don't fault Lewis in this. He had a choice. I don't fault Max in this. I think impacting the championship with a grid penalty is excessive. I'm also a little bit curious about Lewis being surprised that Max didn't, he made kind of a big deal in the press about Max. Well, he didn't really stop and check to see if I was, okay. And that's what we do. Well, I watched the video back. Max gets out of the car. He looks over to Lewis, and Lewis is over there actively trying to back his car out. So I think Max thought, well, clearly he's okay. He's trying to back his car out.
Right.
I thought that was a little specious, given that Mercedes were celebrating and Max was a little torqued, that they were celebrating at Silverstone while he's at hospital, and everybody slated Max for even hinting that, right? And I thought that was a little tedious. But I see everybody parroting this, and I see everybody saying to Max on social media, you were trying to kill Lewis. It was deliberate. You were trying to kill him. You were hitting the accelerator. It was like, oh my gosh, you people. You people have lost your effing mind. It was unbelievable. In the end, neither driver is going to give any room.
No. That's
just the reality of it. Now, we've seen this before from Max plenty of times, but we've seen this from Lewis plenty of times with Nico Rosberg and others when he was younger. It's not in their nature to lift, and that's what makes them the fantastic drivers that they are and the fierce competitors that they are. It's easy
just like Mazepin.
Just like Mazepin, absolutely.
He's not going to give it. Yeah,
that's right.
Give anyone any room.
Not giving any room. That's in his nature. He's a great. But it's easy to armchair this thing and say that Max should have lifted and cut the chicane. But you can do that. I guess my point is, you can sit in an armchair and watch that. If you can make those decisions in nanoseconds, and when you see a gap and you're trying to go through it, and trying to go through the open door and you're alongside a competitor, maybe you should be driving that Red Bull instead of Max Verstappen, because that all happens in nanoseconds. Conversely, I would argue, well, Lewis could have lifted. Because we know from a few races ago when, everybody made a big point at Silverstone, well, when you're on the outside, trying to do that on the outside, you're going to pay for it. And, you know the chances you're taking. Well, Lewis is on the outside here. He could have lifted. He didn't. Right. Mm-hmm. So all of this pretzel logic to undo all the points you made at Silverstone and now remake the same points doesn't really float with me. Look, I'm not British and I'm not Dutch. I don't have a knife in the fight from a national standpoint. What I don't like is the hypocrisy of this.
The human soul has a minimum daily requirement of entertainment, but listening to a podcast like you're doing right now, yeah, that doesn't count. Welcome to the world of MGM Rewards, where we have the greatest live shows on earth, the biggest names in sports, the best chefs on the planet, and the most unforgettable nights of your life. This is way beyond watching 20-second clips on your phone. This is all the entertainment you can handle and more. So join MGM Rewards now and visit MGMResorts.com to book your next Vegas getaway. Welcome to the show.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Particularly sensitive, Paul. Now, I like Damon Hill as much as the next guy. We share the same birthday. I like Damon Hill a lot.
Yeah.
But for him to get on the broadcast after the race and intimate that Max did it on purpose, I find that incredibly base.
Yeah.
And just as ridiculous as those people that said Lewis did it on purpose at Silverstone.
Right. He's emulating something that happened to him, but it's a different circumstance completely.
Different circumstance completely. And I feel for Damon what he went through all those years ago. But for Toto Wolff to intimate that it was on purpose, I find that just really out of control. Everybody said, what Christian Horner said at Silverstone was dog whistling and hatred. It caused hatred against Lewis and all that. I think what Toto Wolff did this weekend caused a lot of hatred towards Max by suggesting that it was a professional or malicious, whatever he called it, a foul.
Yeah.
In football parlance. On retrospect, if you looked at, I just think that's ridiculous. But on retrospect, I think, should he have probably lifted and cut the chicane to find another corner? Maybe he could have done that. But I think both of them went into that corner, Paul, knowing that if they come out behind the other, they're going to play hell. Right. Getting around each other. They knew the points are on the line and they knew their respective pace. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so both of them went into the corner. Neither of them are going to give. And that's what you get. It's just good, hard racing at that point. It's unfortunate, but boy, I got to be honest. The logic in the comments, has just been ridiculous. But anyway, how did you see it from your perspective?
Yeah, what you got here is a battle of wills, right? It's not just about the corner. It's about the championship. It's about the next year. It's, neither one is going to give an inch. I definitely thought the move was on. I definitely thought Max had a right to be there. Kind of, when you look back at the first incident where Max and Lewis clashed earlier in the day, Max kind of sent the message pretty early that Lewis wasn't going to be given room alongside. Lewis, that's his choice. He didn't push Max out. He gave him room. He gave him just enough room. It was a matter of inches, millimeters really. Those curbs, the sausage curbs, etc. Once you get on there, that you're not really in complete control of your car at that point. But I think being where Max was when he was fully justifiable. I don't think he was doing anything wrong there. I think, one of these guys had to give, for them both to get through that corner. Both of them kind of, I'd say it's 50-50, right? One of them could have given, they both could have made it, but neither of them were going to. Yeah. So there they go. They drive off the end of the cliff, right? So,
right.
And that's what you do. And I agree. I think it's just a racing instinct. This is what these two guys have to figure it out together. We're not going to come up with like 5,000 different minuscule rules to nullify hard racing, as far as I'm concerned. The incident earlier, I was thinking was more egregious than that one, quite honestly. And Lewis, at that moment chose, okay, I'm not going to keep fighting with Max. We're not going to clash wheels. I'm going to move on to fight another day because it was early on in the race, right? This came to a pivotal part in the race where basically whoever came out of that chicane ahead was going to win, beat the other one, really. Right. And neither one wanted to give that up. And I think the penalties, et cetera, I still think, as we always go back to, it's based on the outcome of the clash. If they banged wheels a little bit and one had gone off on the dirt, et cetera, maybe no one would have been saying anything because it was such a spectacular point at the end where one car's on top of the other, the wheels spinning, the halo's working. It's like someone's got to pay for this. You know. Yeah, it's and in the end, they gave it to Max, and I think I don't think there should be a penalty at all. I definitely think the grid penalty is very harsh. Going back to my sob story from this weekend, right? So it's like you give people we unfortunately we were right up front and we got put all the way to the back of the field due to just a procedural infringement. At that point, you got to pass 12 cars to get in a hunt of win. It's like a massive hit on your race weekend. And therefore, we're talking about 3 grid places, but we know that a lot of these teams are pretty handy right now. It's just not going to be very easy for Max to make up that ground. So the ruling, this penalty, is playing a pivotal part in championship points and maybe who wins the championship at the end of the year. And I don't think this incident should have any part in that.
No, I totally agree. I think you're artificially impacting the championship. In Silverstone, Lewis got a time penalty. Right. Not a grid place. Right. Now I understand it was during the race or after the race or whatever, during the race that happened. But that doesn't impact the championship. You got to, he went on to win anyway, but still, irrespective of the result.
It could impact the championship.
It could, but not as I guess, straightforward as a 3-place grid penalty. Right. Yeah. So that's a very difficult thing. And I look at look at the situation, like you said. Oh, wow, it was a dramatic outcome. Okay, somebody's got to blame. Well, to me, like you said, it's a 50-50 deal. It's a racing incident. Fernando Alonso said it was a racing. So did other drivers said that. Martin Brundle said it. Paul di Resta, what I feel like was one of the few talking sense there. I think maybe Ted Kravitz felt like it was a racing incident too, But for Damon and everyone, I've seen lots of people on social media just parroting what Damon said. Well, I think what really happened is Max had the red mist because he was mad about the 11-second pit stop. So he came out, he was suffering from red mist and just went in there and deliberately thought, well, either I make it through the corner or we're both out and there's no impact on the championship. And I'm thinking, dude, how in the hell do you know that he had red mist? Did he say he did? Did the team say he did? After he got out of the car, he seemed actually pretty calm about the whole damn thing when they asked him about it. He didn't come out raging about it.
Right. Right. I mean, you got to think it's in racing terms, that situation, it's what he had to do. Lewis is coming out on colder tires. He had a run on him. We know, once you get behind dirty air, et cetera, it was like his opportunity to do it. It wasn't red mist. It was prime opportunity. And if he wasn't going to take it, not to replay that center, saying to Jackie Stewart again, but if you don't go for that gap, you're no longer a racing driver. And that's exactly the gap he didn't want to have to do that because he would much rather have been ahead of him when he was coming out of the pits. But that was the opportunity. And as I've talked about, when you get to a car, if you don't make that first move right away, you can be stuck there forever. you know, because they'll start to figure out everything. You know, the tires will equalize, the air will get in the way. So you have to take the opportunity when it strikes. That was the opportunity to strike. Max tried, you know, they you know, the battle of wheels.
Right. And does Max know that Lewis is difficult to get around? Hell yes, he knows that.
Yes, he does. And Lewis, he knows how fast that Mercedes is in a straight line too.
And especially at this track. So, you know, he knows. I mean, Lewis is nobody's chump. He's damned hard to get around, you know? So, yeah, it's absolutely that situation where you make that determination. This is that opportunity. And so I think it's pretty specious to have to back all the way up to the braking zone to justify your punitive action.
Yeah.
If
I mean, Lewis had given width on the left.
Yes.
It's not like he was.
Yeah, absolutely.
He knew what was going on. He knew what was going to happen when they were coming in. And then, you know, Max did this. Was like, he's not in control of Lewis either. He doesn't know exactly what Lewis is going to do.
No.
Every split second. So he's making his best judgment that this is a legitimate move, which I believe it was. And that the outcome was millimeters. You know, it could very easily if they both come out equal side by side, which we saw in a few other passes, right?
Right. In this, and I feel like no one's listening to kind of what Max actually said. And they said, well, the telltale sign is because, you know, in the past, Helmut and Christian would have been just seething and outraged and saying all kinds of stuff, but they were low key about it. So they knew he was in the wrong. No, it's because you guys all threw a hissy fit and can't stand Christian and called him whining and all that stuff. So
and who wants to engage
muted.
in that mess?
Nobody wants to.
There, right?
From a brand, you don't want to go through that from a Red Bull brand perspective. So just, you know, bite your tongue and move on. But you hate it when he does say something, and when he doesn't say something, that's admission of guilt. I find the logic, you know, completely untenable. But here's the other thing. You know, suggesting, and I feel like nobody really actually listened to what Max said. When he got out of the car, he said there was space, there's a gap there. He was well alongside of it, and he knew that it was going to take two of them to make this work. And he was expecting Lewis to give enough room so they could both get through. He knew there was a percentage that they wouldn't, but he was banking on Lewis giving enough room so they could both get through there.
Or he knew maybe what Lewis can do, but doesn't mean. But if you give up that fight, then you've given up the fight.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. And we know Max, he's not that kind of driver. But what we also learn is neither is Lewis. And I'm okay with that. I'm not blaming Lewis for the accident at all. I'm saying they both went in. Lewis gave some room, got on the entry. Max is going full chat down the straight. Hot tires, braked in the braking zone, was well alongside. And Lewis squeezed him. Paul, in the history of racing, has closing the door and pinching people at apexes, is that an unheard of thing?
I've done it a few times myself.
That is racing, is it not? You know?
I mean, it's push and shove. It's big boys, elbows out. You know, you see it in other sports. You know, you don't see everyone in basketball just, oh, no, you go ahead and take a shot. Then once we get the ball back, well, you know, no, it's pushing, there's shoving, there's trying to find room. And that happens in race cars just at a bit of higher speed. But that's what sport is, you know?
Yeah.
It's trying to gain the advantage and pushing your enemy as far as you can, you know, to get that advantage. And that's what you do.
Yeah. It's what you do. It's what, to be quite frank, it's why I like Lewis Hamilton, because he's not afraid to get his elbows out and get in there. And that's what makes him a champion.
And he's, you know, and there are, I think there's things you learn as you go on, where you know where those lines are, where this is just never going to work and it's no point in doing it, or this is a 50-50, or, you know, you weigh the percentages in your mind as you go along. And I think maybe Lewis is a bit further along than Max, but I'm not saying Max has got it wrong at all. You just know when it's time to hold them, when it's time to fold them, you know? So, and this was one of those times where it was like, all for grabs, you know. And
well, I don't know. I was thinking about it earlier today. I was thinking, you know, I have to think in 2016, Nico Rosberg had that moment he had to make that decision. Either I'm going to stop lifting and acquiescing in situations with Lewis.
Yeah.
The human soul has a minimum daily requirement of entertainment, but listening to a podcast like you're doing right now, yeah, that doesn't count. Welcome to the world of MGM Rewards, where we have the greatest live shows on earth, the biggest names in sports, the best chefs on the planet, and the most unforgettable nights of your life. This is way beyond watching 20-second clips on your phone. This is all the entertainment you can handle and more. So join MGM Rewards now and visit MGMResorts.com to book your next Vegas getaway. Welcome to the show.
Or we're gonna bang wheels and hit each other. But I am not going to lift and play wet nurse to Lewis Hamilton.
Right, because then you'll be a good number 2.
Because then you'll be Valtteri Bottas. You'll be Valtteri Bottas.
Right.
And Nico was absolutely convinced he wasn't going to. And when he raced, and on all those altercations that Nico got into with Lewis, Lewis could have lifted, but Lewis isn't. He's not a chump either. He's not going to. Right. So in order to fight Lewis, you got to be willing to go in there and give it the elbows and rebound hard, and you got to go after it. Nico did it, and he won, and Max is doing it now, Yep. And Lewis is fighting right back in the same measure, and I would expect that. That's what makes this such a great season, Yeah,
and we don't want to nullify this stuff. We want the racing to continue, but if you just keep bringing in these rules and keep psychoanalyzing everybody and everything, then everyone's just may as well just go home.
Yeah, it's silly. Handing out a 3-place grid penalty is just silly in my mind. Oh, and then finally, by the way, Valtteri Bottas started last and finished on the podium in 3rd place, and he was the fastest Mercedes all weekend long.
He was. He's like the forgotten man of this weekend, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately for him. Yeah.
Fastest Mercedes all week long. He had a great race. Great recovery. Just ran out of tires there at the last, I think. Couldn't really mount much of a go for second place, but a great race nonetheless. And kind of seems like this weekend he just, I don't know, maybe he was just a little more relaxed, knowing what his future is. And he's got a ride, and he doesn't have all that pressure, and he just kind of let him run, and he ran, right? Yeah, good for Valtteri. All right, Red Bull, Max Verstappen, DNF, Sergio Perez, P5. Max had some luck on Saturday to get pole position, but while he had a good start during the sprint race, he got jumped by Daniel on Sunday, spent the first stint trailing the McLaren and managing his medium tires. Max had a miserable stop with the mechanic forgetting to push the button on his wheel gun, which signifies that the wall's secure. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Yeah,
not going to work here anymore.
Yeah, not gonna work here anymore. We find it's just best to fix the glitch. That cost him 11 seconds, which put him in the clutches of Lewis at that point, and we know the rest of that story. So up until then, it was a good race. But he was struggling, and this is back to your point about the momentum of McLaren. It wasn't like he was all over the back of Dan. I mean, he was struggling with the mediums. The wear rate of those mediums was difficult. That was a challenge. Losing the rear end. He had his hands full trying to stay up there.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So there you have it.
We know how it all ended, right? The Red Bulls. I think it's great. I mean, you got the McLaren, the Red Bulls, the Mercedes all fighting it out at Monza, when sometimes you get here and you already buy your ticket on who was going to win. So Red Bull's car is, it may not be as great, here as it maybe was at a couple other tracks, but definitely in the game, and they're certainly managing that car to eke the most out of it.
Yeah, they definitely are. Well, Sergio had a bad qualifying again. This is kind of his Achilles heel here. And then he got a 5-second penalty for passing Leclerc by cutting the chicane, not giving the spot back immediately. Otherwise, he would have been on the podium and finished in 3rd. And Red Bull really needed that 3rd, but they didn't get it, And this is those setting down, and these are those coaching moments for Christian. And Sergio's like, dude, gonna need you to pick that game up. I feel like, I don't know. What are you going to say?
I don't know. I mean, we were lambasting. Well, we weren't, but Albon and Gasly, for their poor qualifyings, and why can't they get in within the 0.2 of Max? And Perez isn't doing the same thing. Admittedly, he's running better races from his qualifying position, but still, it's quite confusing to me that he's not a lot closer and not really that fourth guy on the grid. McLaren adjusted. Obviously, this is a McLaren weekend too, but not normally. It should be Red Bull versus Mercedes. Right. It was weird because, I can't remember, one of the commentators said that, Red Bull are asking if that was a penalty or not, and should they give the place back. And I'd never heard anything more about it. It seemed apparent that the way he gained that advantage was by cutting a corner, and just give up the place then, instantly. It's like, come on, Sergio, just let it go and then get after him. You're going to get him again. But by ignoring the fact, or not letting, it was Charles, right, that he got by cutting, by not letting him by, it was self-evident that he was going to get a penalty, and I don't know, maybe they thought that he could make hay and make up for that penalty and it wasn't going to be that big an issue, but it obviously was. So I just feel like they need to instantly give up that spot when it's that apparent and just get on with the game, and there'll be more benefits. Right. And he would have got that podium in the end after all.
Well, and he did have, it's sort of a mirror of what happened on Saturday. He cut it and he gave that position back pretty quick.
Right, right.
So, I'm not quite sure. The team must have felt there was something justifiable about it. But I think Sergio alluded to that. And he kind of felt like the stewards would be a little more flexible given reviewing, because he literally had nowhere to go.
But because he had nowhere to go doesn't give him the right to take a position.
To take a position, right?
Do you know what I'm saying? Right. Just because he, they were in a fight and he got, moved out, doesn't give him the right to then just have a position for free. Just doesn't. He's just got to, wipe off his elbows and his knees and get back on with the job, really.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. One of the bigger questions now with the 3-place grid penalty, I think Red Bull sort of intimated they have to take a new engine, a fourth engine at some point. I don't know if Sochi will be that place. A lot of people feel like it will be, since they're taking the 3-place grid penalty. And that seems logical. On the flip side, I was thinking about it. Well, what wouldn't make it logical? Well, if you really felt strongly that Sochi was your track, like you were going to be really strong at Sochi, then you may feel like you could recover the 3 grid place penalty if you had pole. It'll be interesting to see if they do. But if it's inevitable that you have to take that grid penalty, it's hard to say, right? Because something may happen and automatically send you to the back. Right. And that's when you choose it. But you're playing a game of what if next week we, something happens and we're at the back anyway, then we haven't given up anything, That's right. The
season's getting shorter now. So
I know.
Maybe it's time to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, those teams are just brilliant at the reaction. Like a good example was Lewis was intending to go long. He started on those hards, right? He was going to go long, right? But as soon as Max had that 11-second pit stop, boom! Mercedes tacked quickly, boxed him, because that's the window, right?
Yep.
Brilliant move by Mercedes. Yeah, great move. All right, Ferrari, Charles Leclerc P4, Carlos Sainz in P6. Certainly, there was something to worry about at Ferrari's home Grand Prix with Carlos Sainz crashing on Saturday, and then Charles needing to box for personal reasons. He said he couldn't talk about it over the radio. I don't know, if he had the quick steps or what was going on there, but I don't know.
It was him in that toilet last week, and not the French reporter.
Not the French reporter. It may have been Chuck. But anyway, both drivers saying they didn't feel good this weekend. Come race day, though, Charles and Carlos engaged in really, I would say, a pretty decent damage limitation run for them in the points. They both scored well, 4th and 6th. McLaren was 1-2, and that sucks for Ferrari, but boy, it could have been a lot worse. So I think their damage limitation drive was good. Leclerc benefited from the safety car, got that free pit stop, Paul. That brought him out in 2nd, and boy, he tried to cling on to that.
The crowd went crazy.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, and Charles said, his top 5 drives, he felt like he's driving his butt off out there, but he couldn't hold back Norris, Perez, or Bottas, and ends up down in 4th.
Yep. Ferrari just wasn't quite there, right? And with this track the way it is, it's not easy to pass, but if you got that advantage, then you can make it happen. And ultimately, he put up the good fight. He didn't let any of those passes go down easy, as we saw, which is great. Yeah, I think he was fighting. He was fighting for sure. But in front of the Tifosi, that's kind of what's going to get them behind you. Not that they're not already behind Charles Leclerc for sure. Yeah. So it was fun to watch him, but a little, kind of sad to know that he was really, had the fifth best car to fight with, and he was in the end he was going to be going backwards. But it was a good fight, and he gave it all we could.
Yeah, he really did. And Carlos had that tussle early on with Giovinazzi, which damaged his front wing, and then he kind of had to nurse that home. I mean, he still finished P6, but certainly had damage on that car. And a fourth and sixth place finish is a good result, but not when McLaren wins, and not at your home race, right?
Yeah.
So difficult weekend, but like I said, I kind of feel like it was damage limitation, but certainly not what they would have hoped for.
Yeah, Charles is struggling just a little bit.
Carlos?
Carlos, sorry.
Yeah. I agree. I think he's kind of hit a high spot here.
Yeah, I think he can shrug it off, but I think, I think he's got, I don't know, he's just had too many mistakes, He's got a little Yuki Tsunoda in there or whatever going on. But I don't know if it's something within the team or it's just happenstance or whatever. But yeah, he's definitely kind of losing the fight in the teammate battle right now. So he needs to pick his bootstraps up a little bit and execute, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll in P12, Sebastian Vettel P13. Lance had a decent start. Am I right on that?
What's that? I don't know.
Lance, was he P? Do I have the wrong? Is that where Lance finished? For some reason, it's telling me no, or I'm thinking no. No, he finished 7th. I'm sorry.
That's why he's in. Yeah, that's why he's up here.
Yeah, so he finished 7th. For whatever reason, they didn't change that in the notes. Lance had a decent race. He avoided a penalty for not slowing for the yellow flags, which it's kind of interesting because that the FIA in the past here, they no patience on yellow flags. If you don't slow down, boom, penalty. So I don't know what the stewards saw that kind of felt like, just going to give him a warning because ever since the Joe Bianchi thing, there is no quarter given.
Right. If you do, you do or you don't, right?
Yeah, if you didn't slow, penalty. Yeah, right. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure why they would acquiesce on that.
The only thing could be, visibility to the incident or whatever, maybe, that he couldn't maybe see it. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. So anyway, but he avoided the penalty. And he did hit his teammate on the first lap. Damaged Vettel's car, and that wasn't good.
No.
So I don't know. Before I heap too much praise on the Canadian there, I kind of feel like hitting your own teammate and then finishing and having everyone praise your P7th a little much.
Yeah, I think that was a bit out of order, really, because not only did he hit him, he basically destroyed his race by pushing him out so far that 3-4 other cars went by Vettel at that point, and Vettel was running pretty good at that. So I'm sure Sebastian.
The human soul has a minimum daily requirement of entertainment, but listening to a podcast like you're doing right now, that doesn't count. Welcome to the world of MGM Rewards, where we have the greatest live shows on earth, the biggest names in sports, the best chefs on the planet, and the most unforgettable nights of your life. This is way beyond watching 20-second clips on your phone. This is all the entertainment you can handle and more. So join MGM Rewards now and visit MGMResorts.com to book your next Vegas getaway. Welcome to the show.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Would want to sit down and talk to Lance about that situation. This team aren't in a place where they're just knocking points out the park. They need to protect each other as much as, just run for individual glory.
Right.
And the way, if Lance is going to shove someone like that, another team, fine. But you don't do it to your own teammate. That's, pass him when you can. but don't sacrifice his whole race just for you to squeeze on by. So I thought Lance was a bit out of order there on that move, and I'm sure Seb was not very happy.
Yeah, I bit his tongue. He didn't say anything about it, but I'm sure he's a seasoned, grizzled veteran. I'm sure.
Well, Daddy Warbucks is gonna.
Right. So Seb had a tussle with Ocon, and then some damage to his car from Stroll that left him struggling to make up ground basically all day. It is. I do find the difference between their car and McLaren. They're both Mercedes customers, both Mercedes power, but boy, the delta between them and McLaren, night and day.
Right. Well, I mean, it's, maybe they're still licking their wounds for the whole rake issue.
Yeah.
So, even though it's got the same motor in, I think the configuration of the car is radically different. There's evidently nothing they can do about it. So I think they've actually done better than they were whining about at the beginning of the season. They did kind of get their heads down and work on it. But yeah, I would have thought this track would have been great for them, quite honestly.
I would too. Yeah. I would too. Alpine, Fernando Alonso P8, Esteban Ocon P10. This track didn't seem to flatter the Alpine, but a double points finish is actually a job well done, although Ocon felt a little put upon with the Vettel penalty, and he felt he could have been 7th on the day had the stewards pulled their heads out, decolonized their heads, but he wasn't happy about that.
Okay.
It's there you have it. So that was
and that is the words according to Ocon.
And that is life according to Esteban. Yes.
Yeah.
He toned the rhetoric down a little bit when Ted caught up with him on the notebook, but anyway, not happy. For Alonso, he got the advantage of the safety car. Made up a few places to get in the hunt for 8th, so that was good. Fernando said it was a bit of a lonely race for him. He said we basically overperformed here because we qualified 13th, 14th, and he said that's kind of where we should have been. But they did consolidate their 5th place in the Constructors' Championship with a decent dual points finish, so that's good. But perhaps, according to Fernando, punching above their weight this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I guess is that what they're shooting for, 5th in the championship? not probably what they're really aiming for, but maybe that's what they're accepting at this point.
Yeah,
they're not going to get McLaren, they're not going to get Ferrari, so maybe this is the best of what they can make of the season, so to speak. But yeah, the car sometimes is just kind of like just not there, is it? And this is one of those tracks. But yeah, a safety car, at the right point, the yellow flag, everyone's still running pretty close, even if it's not their ideal track. So that stuff goes in your favor. You can definitely get the points, and that's what he did.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the next team benefited from that too. Williams, George Russell, P9, Nicholas Latifi, P11. George got that benefit of the safety car, got a free pit stop, made up places, and they've now, Paul, scored points in 3 of the last 4 races.
Yeah, look at that.
Huh?
What a drought it's been.
How about Williams? Things are going well over there.
Yeah.
I always knew that Jos Capito would be the solution.
Yeah. And I mean, they're definitely, they're putting themselves in an opportunity, knocking on the top 10, something happens, this or that, they can take the opportunity. I actually feel really bad for Latifi. I thought he probably had his best weekend ever.
Yeah, I did too.
I mean, he was competitive the whole time. He was running the top 10 legitimately. He was ahead of Russell, qualified ahead of Russell.
Yep.
I mean, he was having a great weekend. And the safety car thing really killed him. But he still ended up with P11. But he should be very happy with his race. I'm sure he is. But it's just, that's good for Williams that he's getting up on it.
Yeah, it is. It's really good for him, and I think he's buoyed by the re-signing for next year. And he, just got caught up at the safety car. He had boxed just previous to the safety car coming out, so he dropped out of the top 10 from them, and but held on to P11 as you mentioned. Also, if you can believe it or not, Williams is now ahead of Alfa Romeo in the Constructors' Championship.
I cannot believe it.
How about that?
Blown away. And are they ahead of Haas? We're at Haas.
Yep.
Okay. Just making sure. I thought Mazepin maybe had put in a top 6 run sometime that I forgot about.
Yeah, well, that podium finish by Mazepin, Let's see. AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, DNF. Yuki Tsunoda, DNS.
Yeah.
That was not good. Not good weekend. Yuki was over there not happy at all. I saw his post race. He's like,
it's a shit box.
He was like, yeah, well, this is really bad. You know, it is what it is. But, you know, if I need more time in the car and more experience on track, and if this is going to happen, I don't get any driving
I'm
time.
Here.
Yeah, it's like, see ya. It was like, wow, okay, Yuki. Well, anyway, Pierre had a new PU and gearbox, that's power unit for those of you playing at home, and was set to start from the pit lane, but radioed on the installation lap that something is very wrong with the car. He couldn't drive the race like that. Pierre started the race, drove around for a lap, then parked it. It's a shame because it's their home race.
Yeah.
And given
the
his
glory
pace,
of last year, right?
I know, the glory of last year with his win last year. He had a great qualifying session, right? So things were really kind of lining up to be a pretty good race for Pierre. Just the bottom fell out of that weekend.
Yeah, it's brutal.
And the only thing to make that worse is that Yuki never even started the race. He had brake issues. They couldn't fix them on the grid. And after the installation lap, he gridded up. But after the installation lap, they discovered an issue. They put it on dollies, wheeled it back in the garage, tried to get it fixed so he could start for pit lane. Just couldn't do it. So, bad weekend.
I wonder what that was. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Not much to say about that.
No, not really. Maybe we should have consulted Franz Tost and got his input on that. So not good. Alfa Romeo, Robert Kubica, P14, Antonio Giovinazzi, P13. Antonio had a good weekend going, but a poor start saw him go wide, and then he came back on track in an unsafe manner, causing the clash with Carlos Sainz. And then on top of that pain, he got a penalty for his effort. So he boxed for a new front wing and then nursed an injured car home to 13th. You can sense that his job's on the line because the last 3 races he's qualified really well.
Really well.
Yeah.
It's like, good God, man.
It's like,
might be too
where's
late,
this pace been?
Yeah. But he's showing that pace that might also open doors for other drivers to want to be there.
Yeah.
That maybe wouldn't consider it before.
Like Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, like Valtteri Bottas. But that was a shame for him. I mean, super qualifying. And actually, he did get a good start. He was mixing up with unfortunately, he just went into that chicane just that little bit too much speed, and then had to abort, and then ended up coming on the track and didn't really think that anyone else was on the track at the same time. And Carlos was there, but that's all it wrote. It looked like a pretty spectacular crash, and so happy that they got to fix it and he kept going, but opportunity lost for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that car was, to be qualifying that well. He had a great weekend up until the qualifying as well. So, real opportunity lost. I think it's just that moment, you're like, oh my God, I'm racing with the Ferraris. And then, just lost that little bit of focus on what you really need to do and got a little bit overeager.
Well, and he's a hometown hero, right? And it's in front of the Tifosi. He wants to put on a good result. A lot of adrenaline going there. I have that sound bite, Paul. Give me a moment.
And it's always a big emotion.
It's always a big emotion.
Sorry, Giovinazzi.
Yes.
He sounds a lot like the other guy who used to work for Ferrari.
He does. Let's see. Then we're down to Haas, Mick Schumacher, P15, Mazepin, and
we didn't really talk
DNF.
about Kubica, but not much to
Oh, I'm sorry. I totally missed Robert. Robert had a marginal start. Felt they got about as much as they could from the car on Sunday. He managed his tires in the first stint. He was kind of hoping, he said that the first stint was kind of tough. The tire wear was kind of tough, so he ended up sort of slowing down a little bit, trying to manage his tires in that first stint. And his thought was, once we get to that second stint and get the fresh, the harder compounds on it, or the medium compounds, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He thought once they got those, let me try to do this correctly. He was hoping the mediums on the second stint would be a little better and then be able to make up some time, but it didn't happen. He couldn't follow anyone closely, started chewing those tires up and didn't have the pace. So, yeah.
Very well.
Robert's race. Yes, Haas. So after the safety car restart, Nikita hit Schumacher, spun him, got a time penalty from the stewards for his actions, and then retired the car.
I don't know what to say. This team is a big fat mess. I can't even imagine what's going on behind the scenes there. You know, week after week, we're talking about the same thing, right?
I know.
I mean, Mazepin's bouncing off his own car or every other car, and Schumacher's just trying to ride out the year, as far as I know. I would get out of there if he has a place to go. I can't imagine this will be the team lineup next time.
I'd be very surprised if I was Mick. I would be throwing everything in the kitchen sink to get me over to Sauber.
Yeah, exactly.
And Giovinazzi's. And I know everybody's like, well, I got Callum Island and I got all these other guys. I know.
Yeah.
But man, if I was Mick, I would be making a huge play for Sauber.
Yeah.
And Sauber could make a little hay with that, because that's where Michael, his dad, got his start, was in the Sauber sports car.
Yeah, the sports car team. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And they could, sort of make a little bit of that. And
he seems like a decent driver. It's hard to know how good you are in that
in
car.
A Haas. Yeah.
Right. Even if Mazepin beats him on occasion, it's like that team's a mess.
Yeah.
And who knows what car you're driving and how equal they are and who got it right and who's doing up the bolts on that one. I don't know. The team's a mess and something needs to be sorted. I'm not sure it's going to get better though.
I don't know. It's just
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough.
It's not good enough. Well, he tried to recover from the spin, but the time that he spent trying to get his car pointed in the right direction, everybody was gone, and at that point, he's trundling around. In last. So unfortunately, all right. Well, that's how they finished. Hopefully, cooler heads will prevail with the whole Lewis and Max thing. My gosh, I don't know, folks. My advice to Formula One is just ignore F1 fans at this point, because before it was like, it's really about making the fans happy. But my gosh, the responses and just the hate and vitriol and it's
just don't be reactive.
Yeah, I mean, my gosh, come on, man. Where are the adults? Let's grow up a little bit and look at it objectively. I'm not accusing. I mean, there was a lot of F1 press that I watched. Certainly Martin understood it. Paul DeResta doing his best to try to straighten the Sky Crew out a little bit. Poor PDR.
Well, they do like to make things larger than they need to be.
Yes, but then you had Damon and Johnny Herbert just going over the top on Max and Toto and everybody. It's kind of like, really? Come on, man. And then I did read, some of the other, and kudos to the three guys over at the race. At least they all three of them were like, this is a racing incident at best. At one of them even saying, if you're going to portion blame, he kind of felt like it should have been Lewis, that Max is well along inside, had every right to that apex, every right to that corner, and Lewis should have went out a little wider. I'm not making that argument, but anyway, point being is some people have a measured approach to this. I just reading all of the BS out there.
Yeah. Well, everyone likes to be outraged.
Yeah. Everybody loves to be outraged. And, and then the whole thing with the halo, man, thankfully the halo was on there, no doubt about it. It was like, oh, it would have killed him. And it's like, do we know that? Do we know that definitively? How do we know that? We don't know that. The only way we know that if there wasn't a halo, and my argument is, thank God there was a halo, so we don't have to find out. Right. Just stop with the drama. It's silly. Anyway, all right, let's hand out some awards. That's what we do. The first one we like to call Move of the Race. Woo! Move of the Race, Paul. I like your move of the race better than mine. What was your move of the race?
You do?
I do.
Okay. You mean Zach Brown?
Yes.
Going to Mercedes engines at McLaren.
Brilliant,
I think that was a significant move against the grain at that moment in time. Why you go leaving Honda just when everything's going to get good?
Yeah.
Went against the grain, and I think they're reaping the rewards right now. Definitely.
Yeah.
Dan and Lando are appreciating it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't want to overplay the thing with Zach, but and I don't want to make it sound like McLaren was on life support because I didn't see their P&L. I don't know if they were, but things were tight. I do know that. And what Zach has been able to do and come in and bring in the right people to free things up a little bit, let innovation, cultivate and percolate in Woking, and let them, under Andreas and get refocused and bring Lando in and bring Dan in and just, lighten things up a little bit and let people, be creative and do the things. Kudos to Zach. He's just done a hell of a job. He really has.
Yes.
And it's a bold move, ditching Renault, going over to Mercedes, but it's the right move, and it's a good job. Yep. My move of the race, I really liked Lando and Leclerc battle. I thought those were great.
That was awesome. Yeah.
Those were great. Yeah. You could say the physical move of the race is Max and Lewis. I'm going to stick with Lando and Leclerc passing, although I will give honorable mentions. Kudos to Mercedes. What a class act. They actually brought a 6-pack of champagne bottles down to McLaren because
full
they were
or empty.
Full. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
They brought them extra champagne so McLaren could celebrate. They were worried they may run out, with all the celebrations. So great move on Mercedes' part. I thought it was a brilliant gesture from awesome. Toto and team to do that. And of course they're a customer of Toto's and Mercedes, but they got beat by them. So kudos for them for really respecting the gravitas of the situation and how much it meant to McLaren. It was great.
Yep. Absolutely. That's awesome.
All right. Next award is Donkey of the Race. All right. Donkey of the Race. Who'd you give it to?
I got to give it to AlphaTauri.
Yeah, it's a good call. Or as British as you would say, it's a good shout, Paul.
It's I don't know who's tightening the bolts up there, but on the brakes or fixing the car, but there's a couple of things missing and ending up one lap between two cars, and the stat they said on the TV was like they're the only team that have scored points in every race this year, which I'm trying to remember when, but I'm sure it's a real stat. That's a horrible way to lose that that run of good luck,
Brutal. Yeah. It's brutal. Let's see. Donkey, I'm going to give it to Mazepin.
He's gonna win the Donkey of the Year award, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I was just going to say he's going to have to work really hard to get out of the Donkey of the Year award for both of us, I think, at this point. So that's who I'm giving it to. All right, next award is Driver of the Race. Good God.
We'll do it live. You like my bass? You like it?
All right, Paul. Who's your driver of the race? I think we're in unison here.
I think we're in unison. Yep. The Shuey himself.
Yep. Hard not to pick Dan for that one.
Yeah, it is hard. Although, did you see Lando's face when he had to drink from the Shuey? He did not like that very much.
He didn't like it at all.
I know he's used to popsicles and all that kind of stuff, but that is not what comes out of Dan's shoes. That's for sure.
No. There's no telling what comes out of Dan's shoes.
There's no watermelon flavor. That is nasty stuff. Zach was all for it, though. He could have taken a bath in it, I think.
Zach was totally up for it. But if Dan's Australian and every single animal down in Australia tries to, is there, has the potential to kill you and is trying to. So I would imagine even the bacteria coming out of Dan's shoes could kill you. It's Australian, damn it.
It's true.
They're a hardy lot down there in Australia. We love our Aussies.
Bacteria, for sure.
Yeah,
gnashing teeth.
Yeah, big, nasty, pointy teeth. All right. Shall we do some mailbag?
You've got mail.
Sure.
Let's do it. Hi, this is from Brian. Hey, Brian. Thanks so much for posting a question. You're a good man, Brian. That's what I'm telling everyone. He says, hey, Todd and Paul, this question's for Paul, not me. Paul, it's a great question, though. I'm going to take a poke at, I just want to say this, though. It says, Paul, I was wondering what current Formula One tracks you have you driven on? And in your prime of driving, how do you think you would do in a current Formula One car? Thanks. Love the show. I look forward to every week. Brian from Austin. Okay, so I want to take a poke, not Formula One tracks, but real quick, I want to try to guess it. It's the majority of the tracks you've driven in America. You ready? Here you go.
Oh, are you okay? Not Formula One tracks, though.
No, not Formula One. Just I wanted to. So I know you've driven Sebring.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've driven Road Atlanta.
Yeah.
I know you've driven Elkhart.
Yeah.
I know you've driven Laguna.
Yeah.
I know you've driven Coda.
This is going to take a while. Yeah.
I know you've driven Sonoma.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's 6, and I'm stalling out. So
You're stalling out.
yeah, so there's 6 of them I know of. Have you driven
Mid-Ohio?
Watkins Glen? Have you gone to the Glen?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mid-Ohio, of course. You've driven that. You've
Mid-Ohio.
driven Gateway.
Gateway, Virginia, VIR.
Yeah.
Driven Indy, the Formula One version.
Yeah.
I've driven Phoenix, the Oval. I've driven Phoenix,
Las
the
Vegas.
track. I've driven Vegas.
Yeah.
I've driven
Just about every track in
just
America.
about, Miami Grand Prix. I mean,
Yeah.
there's not many I haven't driven, quite honestly.
Yeah, you've driven just about all of them. So, okay, for Formula One, current Formula One tracks, Coda I know.
Right. And that's about it, really.
Yeah. Well, you've driven Silverstone.
Yeah, but not competitively or anything
Not
like
in
that.
anger.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've driven Indy, which is a Formula One old track. So, no, I haven't been to many of the others, actually, unfortunately, but at least driven them,
Right. So, yeah, you've driven Silverstone, but not in anger.
Right.
Yeah. So, I think the point here is we need to get you over
Formula One ride?
Spa.
Yes, that would be great.
I'm
working on that.
I would love to do a hot lap with you at Spa.
Yeah, I would like to do a hot lap with me at Spa.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm working on that. That's my goal.
That
to
would be
get
good.
there.
All right. So, how do you think you would do in a current Formula One car?
At my prime, he says.
In your prime.
Yeah, so I'm not going to speculate on that because I have no idea, right?
But what you do know is you would have done the same thing Max did at Italy.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I have done the same thing Max did, but I didn't end up on someone's. But so here's the thing with that. It's a great question. It's a tough one for me to say. Oh, I would be mid-pack. I have no idea. But it's like when you're at your prime, it's not just being a very good driver. It's having the opportunities to hone your skill in the right direction, right? So when I started driving Formula cars, but I was not 14 years old at that time. And I could see the writing on the wall that Formula cars at that point, and still are, every year you have to come up with budgets, another budget. So that's kind of where I...
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
diverted, even though I always wanted to be a Formula One driver, but I also always loved sports cars. And that's why I diverted to sports cars and touring cars, etc., because it was a lot easier, or never easy, but it was.
But the budgets didn't need to be as big.
To gain budgets, to gain manufacturer backing, tires, fuel, whatever. It was a lot easier to find a way. And in a sports car, you co-drove with people who also had funding that maybe you could piggyback on, that kind of thing. And the Formula One ladder is so difficult. It needs to be so buoyed by a lot of individual personal money to hone your skill.
Right.
It's more not necessarily just about racing in it, but you have to be in it, and you have to be in a Formula car, you have to be in a go-kart, you have to be doing that day after day. You have to have the team behind you to make the adjustments to give you the best car out there to really become a better Formula driver. So if I said at my prime, I would say I probably wouldn't be that great of driving a Formula One car, right? I think the Formula One cars now are probably easier to drive than the ones when I was, driving the 1100 horsepower, turbo cars would have been insane, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think I was ever in a place, even at my prime, that I would have been able to go jump in a Formula One car and compete. really well. I knew what you would have to do, but you just got to have the time in day after day to be able to bring that level up in a Formula car to where you can be successful in a Formula One car.
Right. So you spent, instead of doing that and all that time in Formula car, you did spend all that time driving sports cars and touring cars. Yeah.
Right. And because the opportunities were a lot more open. And as I said, I won my first race in 88 and I won my first championship in 89. And I was already racing in the Pro Series in 89 because sports car enabled me to do that. But no way, I pursued it a little bit with Formula Atlantics and stuff, but you just had to have so much money to even get in the door. And then you were getting in the door with a lower team. Yeah. That wasn't going to do you any good anyway. So, what happens if you show up and finish 12th, Right. Nothing, absolutely nothing. You just have to come up with a budget for next year. But if you jump in a sports car where the opportunities and the field, you can have a better chance of getting in a good car, you can show what you can do, and it then opens up other opportunities. It's
kind of one of those things that if you look at Kevin Magnussen, right, trundling around midfield in the Haas, that he jumps over into IMSA and wins races.
Right. Yeah, he's because of their position in championship and our position, he's next door to us he's been next door to us past 3 races. Yeah. So it's funny, yeah. But now he's already off the Peugeot, right? So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that's
Does that make sense? I mean,
it does totally make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why there's very few people ever get to Formula One unless someone had to back him, and some people get there purely because they're backing, like Marzipan. But it's not just about being good; it's about honing that part inside you to get the most out of a Formula car, which is downforce, which is speed, which is, and so there you go.
Well, but it's a good reminder, like if you're newer to Formula One, it's a good reminder that, we talk about Mazepin, we talk about these paying drivers, and, it's hit or miss. I mean, some people feel like, it's justifiable because the teams need the budget and the money, and there's, advertising dollars are tough and all that kind of thing. There's other people that are diametrically opposed to paying drivers. They hate that concept, but it's not a new concept, Paul. And your evidence of that, certainly back, we're talking about 88, 86, 88, 87, 88, where you were having to raise all of this big money. This has been going on. This was, Senna had to raise money.
Exactly.
Brundle had to raise money. Your friend Tommy Byrne trying to get the money. Ian James, I'm sure when he started trying to get that money to, fund an open seater career.
And Formula One cars are Formula cars in general are very difficult cars to drive. You can't just come up with money and then just jump in a car in the middle of a championship and expect to have any chance of doing well against people. It's got to be, like Lance Stroll, right? He had the money behind him. He has talent, but he was in a car every day, and they even created a series in Florida for him to race against Max and everything in the Formula 3 cars or whatever, just to keep him racing and being competitive and keep him going, keep that graduation of skill level up. If you got that support, then that can happen,
Yeah, very tough.
Yeah.
Great questions, Brian. Let's see. David asks, I'm curious if you took an F1's most recent fan survey. I did, David. And my thoughts on the survey contents as they provide a glimpse into what F1 wants to know about fans' preferences. He said 2 things that stuck out to him was the confirmation that F1 leadership still seems preoccupied with features like gimmicks rather than benefits. Far too many questions probed the reverse grids, third driver races, new exotic locations, multimedia entertainment zones, and for some reason how F1 might attract more celebrities to the sport. I thought
because that's
that
what
too.
we need.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need. If that's not too much of a downer, maybe this will help. He said in the second one, there was one question that actually made me think, is F1 better today than it was 5 years ago? And he said, my first impulse was to smash the no button. But then I thought again, 5 years ago is the 2016 season, a season in which a single team won 19 of 21 races in the season and which introduced Baku. So instead I gently clicked yes, but I wonder what your thoughts are. Is F1 better today than 5 years ago? How about 10 or 20 years ago? Is the sport generally on a good trajectory? Great questions, David. I did take the survey. I hate to paraphrase paraphrasing Grace because this is the industry she's in, a survey industry, so she knows it far better than I do. But I do agree with Grace that they've done dozens and dozens of these fan surveys. Mm-hmm. And as I've said, and Grace has said many times, you need to be careful about just doing all these surveys. Doing surveys for the point of doing surveys is pointless. Right. And when you ask a question, you have to know exactly why you're asking that question and what data you're seeking to harvest and for what purpose you might use that data. Yeah. Not just well, that's kind of interesting to know. Yeah. None of that matters, So for every survey, this is what Grace is genius at. For every question on a survey, it's directly tied to some sort of development or concepting around what you might, choose to do. And there's a purpose and meaning for doing it. And to her point and my point jointly is don't ask or do a survey if you're not planning on doing anything.
Right.
Because
if you're just going to do whatever you want to do anyway, right?
If you're going to do whatever you want to do, because what you're doing is you're asking millions and millions of fans to take time out of their schedule to answer an exhaustive email or a survey and give you their email, and you're asking them to take all that time to do the survey. You damn well better do something with results, because if you don't, you're going to start pissing the fan base off, and nobody's going to do surveys, and it'll get tedious, and that's not what you want to do. Yeah. So that's my thought on it.
Yeah. Was there a question on how long should we interview celebrities who have actually nothing to do with the race itself?
Exactly.
While we're trying to get information on what's happening before the race.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Look, it's like he was on the grid and he was like, oh, it's Vin Diesel. Oh my God, Vin Diesel's like nearly wetting himself. I'm like, I'm sorry. Are we a Formula One race or are we at like the Golden Globes? I'm not quite sure what's going on.
I know it's a big deal to some people.
Irritating.
I've never been one of those people that's starstruck. I've hung out with all three of the Who members. I've hung out with lots of the rock and roll stars, Jack Bruce, all those guys, Peter Frampton, Ringo Starr, all those guys. And I've been around them and hung out, Joe Walsh, all those guys. And to me, they're people, and it's not that I don't respect what they achieve. Of course I do, absolutely. But when I was in the paddock at COTA, I chatted with some of the drivers and stuff like that. I'm incredibly respectful of their achievements and their skills and stuff, but I'm not starstruck like that, I
just don't see the point in asking. I mean, I'm fine seeing pictures of them. Hey, look who it is. Look who it is. That's great. But don't take time out of the pre-race.
No.
Grid walk explaining strategies and
tell me what's going on with AlphaTauri's issues
with the race. Yes.
Why aren't the AlphaTauri's
right before Wimbledon final was going, and they're not going to start interviewing Sebastian Vettel, and asking him his favorite tennis star. I mean, get on with it. Get on with this. It's fine them being there. That's great. It
is great,
but I'm not interested.
No, I'm not either. I want to know why AlphaTauri has no cars on the grid. That's what I want to know.
Right.
Not what Vin Diesel thinks about being at a race.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm sure he's impressed.
He was doing this. Like,
he was.
I don't even know what that means.
I'm sure he's excited. I'm sure he's happy to be there. I'm sure he finds it mesmerizing and really cool, and he loves it, and he's a car guy, and I'm sure that, all right, done, go.
Yeah.
We've heard that.
That's great to be given the opportunity to be on the grid. Right. Enjoy it.
It is. Enjoy it. Yeah.
That's just,
Move on. All right. Next, Miles asked, how do teams approach developing cars to suit their drivers' styles? It seems that some big-name drivers have struggled when moving to new teams. This generally is also met with the generic driver X is struggling with car setup or tire warming, etc. Recently, Ricciardo seems to have struggled at McLaren, Schumacher when he returned to Mercedes. Some of the big names in season moves have also struggled. So how do they go about that, Paul?
That's a great question. And sometimes they don't solve those problems. I mean, look at us, at Hard Racing. We've got 4 drivers now. We're during our engineering briefings, everyone's got something to say. But I mean, the thing is, it's like every driver feels things differently. Everyone, some like a really positive front end. Some get nervous if the back end's stepping out of them. Some, like a lot of sidewall flex. Some don't care. Some do. It's a lot to do with, engineering the car to give the driver the feedback that they desire, like Dan with the brakes, right? I mean, all the Formula One cars have brakes, they're all got Brembos or whatever, but it's just how that car gives that feedback through the pedal, and how that driver reacts to that feedback in the pedal, be it a false negative or a positive,
I guess, Paul, because I was thinking, the first thing I thought about on this, and you know far better than I do, but remember when I asked Sebastian Vettel, you like a pointy car? Mm-hmm. And he goes, yeah. He goes, I don't like waiting on the front end. Right. He goes, because you turn, you're just waiting and waiting when he hates that. So he'd rather have a car much more pointy at the front end than, say, maybe Jenson Button.
Right.
Who likes a little bit of understeer. Right?
A little bit, yeah.
And that's a personal driver preference, right?
And it gives you more confidence going in the turn. If you're not confident that if the back end's going to step out at any moment and that makes you a little nervous or uncomfortable, then you're never going to get the max out of the car. But if you turn in, there's just the front end gives you the feedback first, then you can drive to that. And it's so we saw Alonso.
So if you were to team, let's say you and your buddy Ian James, and let's say both of you, let's say you liked a pointy car and he didn't, he liked a little bit of understeer.
Right.
But you're building one car.
Right.
So that's what we're talking about, Miles, is how do you develop that car? So if Dan came in and he liked, I'm just using pointy versus non-pointy car. If Dan came in and liked his car to behave this way, and that's what made him fast, and the car's already built kind of around Lando and what makes Lando fast, but it doesn't really translate. Right. What are we faced with there, Paul, as far as developing? Or does the driver simply have to re-acclimate and change his driving style? And how much can a team develop a car today?
They can only develop it so far. I mean, obviously, it's not just a matter of, he likes a loose car, let's, lessen the wing. There's so much that's going into it, where the contact patch is and where the center of pressure is and where the weight distribution is. And sometimes you can't just extract that out of the car because you want it to, right? So that's why sometimes it takes a little long, because they're trying to find a way of adapting what's intrinsically there to somehow change it enough where it's not going to take away grip, but giving the driver feedback that they want. And luckily, obviously in Formula One, yes, the cars are identical, but at least they're not driving the same car. They're driving identical cars, right? So you can go down a little path, but sometimes it depends on how the engineer works with the driver, on how they can extract what that driver wants. Because in a way, it's an abstract. It's not written there on ones and O's on the screen, what that driver wants. So it still does come down to feel, even though we're pouring over data, et cetera, like that. The driver still has kind of that last 10% is on what they feel is going to happen. Because if they don't feel it's going to happen, they won't want it to. They're not going to challenge the car to do that.
Right? And in Formula One, each has it's the same car, but each has their own, and you can tweak them within reason.
You can tweak them within reason, yeah, but they're not going to go down a whole other pathway for a second driver.
Right.
They're gonna not take big leaps. It's going to be a process, which is maybe why we're nearly halfway through the season, and Dan's finally getting his head around the car, because they don't want to upset the direction they've been going, because they know it works.
Yeah.
Lando shows it works. So now it's, okay, how do we get this car that's fast to work and give Dan the feedback that he wants, right?
So in your world, though, Paul, where you have so you have, let's say, Roman and Ross. They're both driving the same car.
Right.
And they probably, and I guess the ultimate thing is to have two, if Roman and Ross both like the same behavior from a car, and they're both fast that way. But if they're not, is the thing at that point you're trying to get the number 23 Aston Martin neutral and then letting them adapt to that neutral car? Are you favoring a little more pointy car, or how do you manage that within one car and two drivers?
Well, sometimes everyone's got to give up something.
So the drivers have to be flexible in that series.
The drivers have to be, it's like, okay, I know you don't particularly like this, but let's just give it a go for a while. Let's see, because if we have to change everything for what you're asking, it's going to seriously damage the pace of the car or the other driver's feel for the car. So, is a bit of toing and froing on, sometimes, it's what Roman was used to doing in a Porsche, and his just instinct was to do, lots of steering input. And it's like, okay, we need to bleed that out of you because that isn't what this car demands, right? We're not going to adapt the Aston Martin to drive like a Porsche, right? You've got to adapt to what gets the best out of the car for ultimate lap time, and that may not be your natural or your learned experience in the car, and usually a young driver can adapt a lot easier than an older driver can to those kind of things, right? So Sebastian Vettel's going to have a lot harder time to do it than Mick Schumacher coming in and trying to drive something a little bit different, or
Dan and Lando maybe.
Right. So so you is a little to and froing sometimes. That it takes a little confidence, on the drivers to understand what the engineers are trying to achieve and to buy into that, and willing to give up a little bit of, I want the whole car to feel as perfect for me as I can possibly do.
Right.
For the ultimate goal, which is to have a car that's good for both drivers.
Right. And I'm not implying that Formula One drivers don't, have to compromise and change their styles. I think they do. I think Fernando is a perfect example,
right,
of adapting his style to the limitations of the car that he's in, right? And I would think, I would think any one of them are good at that to a point. But when you've got a wholesale change your driving style, that takes a little more time.
Yeah, and some they can't.
Some of them can't.
Some it just doesn't happen, and then they have to move. They move to another team, and they just needed a fresh air.
Right.
Well, maybe they just needed a different car.
Right.
Maybe that car was never going to get to the point where they could maximize their skill potential in it, because it just didn't fit. I mean, everyone's got their own little things, how they turn the wheel in, how they release the brake, how they get on the throttle. Every single driver is just that little bit different. Obviously, ideally in a sports car, you get two drivers who are very, very similar styles.
Right.
I wouldn't say that Ross and Roman were that, but Ross educated Roman on what's best for this car, and Roman practiced it. And then when you see the results, that makes it a lot easier to buy into a different style, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. If Ross can jump in the car and understands what the car demands in order to be quick, and then he jumps in and he's a little quicker, and Roman is like, okay, so I do need to do that, and I can be quicker.
Right.
And you're willing to make those changes if you know the benefits, So
right.
Yeah, it's interesting. So anyway, Miles, I hope that helps. Now, to that point, I would think it's safe to assume, Paul, we often talk about how at Red Bull that car is designed and developed to sort of flatter Max and what Max expects from a car. Right. I think you could say that Mercedes designed very much around Lewis and his driving style. And that means that knowing what Lewis likes from a car and how he is, what makes him quick in a car, then they're going to compromise on things that he doesn't necessarily do in a car and really focus on the things that he does do, right?
Yep.
So anyone else jumping in that car, it's to your point, you can't wholesale change the second car. That's very expensive to do. So there is some compromising. You're asking Valtteri Bottas or George Russell or Daniel Ricciardo to sort of accommodate what that car demands.
Yeah.
And it's a tall ask in some cases.
But, if you're a professional driver, you should be able to do it. There's always a degree where, as I said, if you're like a really pointy car and you're in a car that just understeers, I mean, it's going to be difficult, right?
Right. But maybe a good example of that is Charles Leclerc, right? Who came into that Ferrari program, very much a car designed around Sebastian. Remember the first part of the year, kind of really struggled, but he said he went away and really rethought kind of his approach to driving. And then he came out and pretty much had the measure, right? Yeah. So it was a good example of both, I think, in that sense. All right. Well, that does it for this podcast. Let us know what you think, except save all your acidic comments and vitriol for another forum, because I'm not interested in all the hate pieces and all that good stuff. But share your opinion at theparcfermé.com. Just do it with decorum and civility as always. If you like the podcast, go over to iTunes, give us a good rating, show us some love there. Huge thank you to our Patreon supporters, because we would not and could not do this podcast without you. If you feel inclined, you can go to theparcfermé.com. Over on the right-hand side, it says support us. Click on that, and you can support us for as little as $1 a month. And we would greatly appreciate that. And you can catch Paul and his team, all of the wonderful people of Heart of Racing, in a week and a half at Long Beach.
Long Beach.
2 cars, baby.
2 cars. Let's
Two
hope we
Aston
do.
Martin.
We had 2 cars for a very short time at Laguna.
Yeah, right.
Let's hope we have 2 cars that make it to the finish. That's all they ask.
Right.
Yeah, fun event though. Yeah, come on down.
Yeah, Long Beach, say hello. And the next race is Sochi. So, Paul, you get a break. And that means next week we get to get Grace back on and let her wax poetic for an hour and get her yayas out about how excited she is about McLaren.
Yeah, once you stop yelling,
Yeah, right.
Be very hoarse by now, I imagine.
Yeah, right.
Good for her, though. Good for her.
Exactly. Good for Grace.
Yeah.
So, all right. Until next week, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camera, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over. I don't feel I've got to prove at all. I don't really want to prove anything. I started as an amateur with no idea or no intention of becoming world champion. I was curious to find out what it was like to drive a car fast, to drive on a certain circuit, to drive a certain type of car.